And welcome, class. We're going to focus on Chapter 13, Health Information Systems, more specifically, Strategic Planning. So, when we start to think about an organization, we want to think about a systems overall view. And so, that's that perspective on how all of the elements work together, ultimately with the goal of achieving a common purpose, right? When we think about those concepts of a system, we have a set of elements, which ultimately the hardware, the software. And when we break down human, we have people, policy, and process, right? Ultimately, all of those elements working together. And so that could be interfaced. We have some level of connectivity. We are integrated in some way, shape, or form. And we cannot forget the concept of interoperability, specifically as it focuses in the healthcare realm. With that optimal goal of achieving a common purpose. And so, what is that? Maybe it's greater access to care. Maybe it's a greater quality of care, improve patient safety, improve cost of care, efficiency of the care, whatever it might be, but ultimately to achieve that common purpose. Some basic terminology: health information system versus health information technology. When we look at the system, again, we're looking at all of those components which ultimately are needed to ensure that health data, so raw facts, figures, which is what data is processed into something useful known as information. So we process the data, we manipulate the data to turn it into information, ultimately allowing us to make informed decisions. Whereas that health information technology, specifically the computer systems, so that is the hardware, the software that's used to process health data into health information. And here is an overall look at that systems view, that health information systems. All of this moving along with what we refer to as the System Development Life Cycle, or the SDLC. And so the SDLC ultimately are steps recognizing a need that we need to move through in order to achieve a desired result. We repeat the cycle if monitoring shows that the desired result is no longer being achieved. And so while we may think of it as a start to end process, there really is no end. We circle back. And so in this graphic, we see start with that need, ultimately identify or specify requirements, and we design or we acquire a system, right? And so that's designing it in terms of customization. Perhaps we acquire it from an off-the-shelf type program. Ultimately, we have to develop it, create it, and then put it into practice or implement it. We maintain it, and then we monitor those results. Again, if we see that we are no longer reaching the results that we prefer or that we need, we then start to identify the need again. In order to understand strategic planning, we have to understand that this type of a plan is focused on long term, not the short term, not the day to day, not the overarching what happens in an organization today, tomorrow, but long term. And so at least a 3 to 5 year planning horizon. And that's in comparison to the tactical plan, which again is going to be short term, focused on one project, whereas the strategic plan is focused on many potential projects to help accomplish the organization's mission. As we prepare for strategic planning, we need to think about what governance structure is in place. What are the needs ultimately that we desire? What about the challenges? What about requirements? And ultimately, so we have needs, we know what they are. How are we going to monitor whether we are progressing towards those, towards achieving those? Here's a graphic that shows a federal incentive program for meaningful use for electronic health records. And you can see that the various stages over a multi-year period to ultimately get to a point where we're promoting interoperability. With that governance and planning on the horizon, we think about ultimately who's involved. So we have senior managers, we may have board, we may have cabinet level positions, but we think about those high level individuals. We also should have or include stakeholders from all of the different areas of the organization to make sure that everyone has a say, plays a part in the organizational strategic plan and its planning process. When we look at needs, we want to define those in terms of SMART goals. So are they specific? Is it measurable? If it's not measurable, how do we know that we are moving towards achieving that goal? Is it attainable or is it impossible from the get-go? Is it relevant based on our organization, based on our mission, based on the goals of the organization? And we want it to be time-based, because if it's not time-based, the goal may never get to a point where it's realized. Thinking about the challenges, and so we conduct an environmental scan. Internal, external factors. And so with this identifying of challenges, we may think of a SWOT analysis. Internally, what are the strengths and weaknesses? Externally, what are the opportunities and threats? And so here is just an example of a health system, health information system strategic plan. And you can see here the various year spans, the applications that are involved, any technology, operations, etc. We want to maintain and we want to monitor, so we have to review regularly. Bottom line, if it's not working, we want to modify. And then we need to carry out the strategic plan. We have a steering committee, we have project management that ultimately are constantly monitoring and helping to adjust, if need be, the goals of our strategic plan. And we also have requirements analysis, where it is precisely identified what is needed to meet those SMART goals that were identified earlier. Thinking about acquisition of system components, we have the potential for a vendor strategy, and so purchasing from a vendor. Perhaps we have the best of fit versus best of breed, and so are we designing a system? Are we purchasing or acquiring a CAN system and implementing? Are we using software as a service? Many options that we need to think through. When we implement, we have to install the system. Do we have any level of customization? Ultimately, we have to get data from the old system into the new system. And so that data has to be converted. We need to understand the workflow or the process level to ultimately be improved. We look at as-is diagrams to understand the current situation, and we design to-be models to understand how the future will be improved. We need to monitor and understand policies and procedures. Testing must take place, as well as training for all of the individuals that will be using the system before going live. We have a system for review and support that is ongoing. We have to understand that there will be upgrades. Maintenance will need to take place, perhaps enhancements. At some point in the future, a replacement will need to be made. This is all part of that review and support. We also understand the system level of maturity. So we put a new system in place, we train our users, and ultimately then we adopt. Every user is using the basic functionality of the system that has been put into place. We have optimization, and so activities that extend beyond the basics, whereas not all employees may be using those, but certain levels, certain groups, or certain functional units. We look at the various types of health data and information, and so it spans from clinical to financial, personal, population, public health. We have structural type data such as data models. We have audit logs, those being generated by information technology. We have activity review logs. Here we see an example of data modeling, and so the basic model, a physician enters an order, and so perhaps an order for a diagnostic test, a pharmacy order, whatever it might be. And at the bottom, the complete, we have a physician that enters, again, orders. And so in this example, we have a physician ID that is attached to the physician. We have drug ID that is attached to the order, because in this case, we're talking about a prescription. And so from a relationship standpoint, a physician may enter many orders. So one physician, any one physician, may enter many orders at one point. And so there you see the one-to-many relationship. Last, we have various concepts in terms of interoperability issues, which is areas of concern or corrective action, software programming, perhaps a need for reconfiguration. We have data quality discovery process, again, through audits, observed use, and output evaluation. We also use the concept of a walk around. That is a grand round with multiple individuals and work teams to spot workflow issues with the concept or with the overall idea of helping to improve those workflow issues. I hope that you enjoyed the content within this chapter, and I look forward to working with you very soon.